Hello, Lily. I'm going to be looking at your paper too. The field of architecture, what's next? Throughout the research process, I found many things that had been wrong in the field of architecture as a whole. Topics that were unsaid, but all mutually understood. I found it hard to decide on one topic to focus on when deciding to write this paper. After evaluating all of the questions I had come up with, I decided to go with a topic very concerning for people all over the world. Majority of the questions, usually people say the majority of the questions I had come up with had a lot to do with the treatment of men and women because it continues to be a problem in almost every field worldwide. Since the topic of equal pay and treatment with men and women is very common and talked about a lot, I decided to research more about climate change. Climate change has been a concerning topic for society globally. Although the topic of equal pay and treatment with men and women is a big deal, I thought it would be more influential to discuss a topic that happens every day, stage, and gender of people. It happens at every age or to people at every age. There are a lot more things involved in the topic of global climate change, and I saw researching climate change in architecture something that would influence the next years of our lives. Okay, I feel like there's some places you could kind of clean things up. The first couple sentences, like topics that were all unsaid but mutually understood. I don't know what that means. I found it hard to decide on one topic. Sure. After evaluating all the questions, I decided to go with a topic very concerning for people all over the world. It's kind of repetitive too. I will just emphasize to you that I'm not going to worry so much about page count. So go ahead and take out everything that's not saying anything. Throughout the research project, I evaluated many different sources and made sure they were accredited and reliable for me to be using in an academic research paper. When researching climate change, many problems in articles arise. You mean problems in articles? Things like what you can do to change or put a stop to global climate change show up. Many websites have pages to donate and try to put a stop to global climate change. When thinking about global climate change, I first think about pollution in the air. Oh, seems like a new paragraph. Totally new topic. I think about pollution. As an architecture major, I thought back to the Industrial Revolution and when pollution first became a problem. I thought of the inefficient architecture and the resources that were being used for power supply. When thinking about climate change, well, they became inefficient, right? Some of them were more efficient before this happened anyway. When thinking about climate change, I see architects as one of the front lines in putting a stop to it. While researching, I found all the reasons that could be used versus what had been used. All the resources that could be used for what? I then chose to take my research further into interviews with two architects at a sports architecture firm in Kansas City called Populous. Ooh, the responses I received from the interview did not surprise me at all. The results were actually very pleasing. Okay, good. Beginning the research portion of my paper, this paper started with many questions. From minor things to major things, every aspect was thought about. That's another sentence that doesn't really say anything. Right? I looked at everything. Digging through articles and finding the answers I needed, I asked a few questions in the end, but they were serious and loaded questions when it came to asking architects. When you were digging through... Oh, okay, you have a fragment here. That's the problem. Digging through articles and finding the answers I needed, period. That's not a complete thought. Digging through articles and finding the answers I needed... Yeah, you don't have the rest of your thought there. Digging through articles and finding the answers you needed, what happened? While that was happening, what else happened? Or I asked a few questions in the end, but they were serious and loaded questions when it came to asking architects. I'm going to assume they were serious questions. They were loaded questions. I guess I'm just stopping to be like, why did you think they were loaded questions? What difference do you notice between architects and interior architects? As an interior architecture major, I find there to be strong differences in the interiors versus the regular architecture majors. I wanted to know if there was a clear and definite difference between the two in the workforce. Good question. What are the challenges in your career? Wait, what? With recessions and companies. Okay, we need some connection here between the first one you said I wanted to know, then the other one should be set up in that same way to kind of carry it through. I think so. I wanted to know this. I wanted to know this, right? Through all the connections I have made and all the classes I've taken thus far, I have noticed a common topic of recession and company jumping. This feels like a new paragraph, new topic. I thought this question would be viable in my research and seeing what companies are strong and why the architects I interviewed. You don't need an apostrophe there because it's just multiple architects. Nothing belongs to them. And apostrophes in English are, God, so stupid. Okay, what do you think architecture could do about climate change? This question was the pushing question in my research. I really wanted to get down to the bottom and ask the architects up front if they were really doing something about it or if it was a second thought. I'm wondering as I read through this, maybe it would be better not to list out beforehand what your questions were, because, I mean, a lot of people, I feel like most people have just woven those into their discussion, right? So when I asked about this, they said that. When I asked about this, they said that. Because this is like a long list of questions that I'm just kind of getting lost in. What kinds of things do you take into consideration starting a project? This question was based solely on the idea of if architects took the environment into consideration as their first thing when starting a new project. Okay, I just don't feel like you need to explain all that. How important is it to take human interaction into consideration when starting a project? As addressed before, being an interior major, I was very, yeah, see, if you'd addressed it before, you don't need to address it again. Asking questions in every way possible was important for this research. Not only thinking about the regular questions one would ask, but asking things that may seem out of the box or even irrelevant. Okay, you're still a lot more not saying anything at all. Take it out. Through all my research, I found answers to remain consistent in the articles I read and the answers I received in my interviews. Well, okay, what did you find though? Although the articles I read were very informationally packed, I'm dying to know. I found my most useful information to be from my interviewees. The article I read was titled "The Climate is Changing, So Must Architecture," and it was very informationally packed. There have been a lot of number-based research done. Number-based? I don't know what that means. Everything was very scientific and statistical. The research was there, but the I think you mean genuineness or the authenticity on what was being done now was not. Conducting the interviews I did with the list of questions I made gave me all the answers I needed. More saying things you don't need to say, which is just making me think you had a really hard time making this long enough. But you need to write about things that are meaningful to get that practice. Like, I just don't have much to say about your writing when you write things that you don't need to be said. It's not good practice. Let's see. I lost my place. Okay, when it came to patterns, I found many between the interviews I did. The people I chose to interview were two architects. Yay, from a sports architecture firm in Kansas City. I first interviewed Kent McLaughlin, who is principal at Populous. I think it's Populous, but maybe it's not. The second person I interviewed is on Kent's. Okay, you need to call him by his last name because this is formal paper. So the second person I interviewed was on McLaughlin's work team, and her name was Carrie Rizak. Two of my most important questions for them were answered very similarly in the end. Although the information I found in the articles was important, I saw it be more important to understand question and what was currently done in a working firm over statistics say. And okay, so again, here's a place that you might be like previewing what you found, but I'm still just not understanding why it's important because you're not telling me what was similar and what was said. So yeah, okay, here when you get to the first question I asked, I think what you need to do is to take these questions and have that be the main skeleton of your paper. You're not going to do any more previewing than just the first paragraph maybe, and then you go right into the questions I asked. Kent first answered by saying there is no choice but to consider human interaction and response. The computers do not do the work, humans do. It's all input from humans. He went on to say, if you cannot interact with people, you will not survive. See, I thought you were asking about human interaction like within the space, but obviously I'm wrong. I'm not an architect. Okay, it was interesting to see his responses being focused not only on the client, but also the architect. Okay, it's good you explained that because I would not have taken that out of there at all. When asking Carrie the same question, and we want to call her whatever her last name is, She answered by saying, human interaction also increases trust and credibility among the entire project team, including the clients, architects, engineers, and contractors. Also focusing on the before rather than the after. You mean focusing more on what happens while the project's being worked on, or maybe? Seeing these answers made me question if an interior architect would answer differently. I find human interaction with a space after being built being important. Okay, so you were thinking of it like I was thinking of it. If an interior architect would answer differently, I find human interaction with a space after being built being important. Yeah, you'll fix that. I had never thought about beforehand, so I can now see them as being equal in importance and influence. You can see what is being equal. Okay, you find human interaction after it's built to be equally important to the interaction of a team. I think that's what you mean. But let's see. The second question I asked was, what do you think architecture as a whole could do about climate change? This was the burning question that gave me answers on what firms are doing today and what they see for the future. Kent McLaughlin first answered by saying, if we simply start designing with the knowledge we already have, it will drive all design and construction to be more efficient. Our part is relatively easy to do. Kent McLaughlin then went on to explain methods that have been used in the past and the relevance that they had in architecture today. He took many things into account and explained them thoroughly on what his team was doing and what they had planned to do. He then explained, with a 2030 challenge in place, you will see more and more sustainability happening in design and practice. This will automatically change our climate from waste management recovery press to how companies are manufacturing products that have better life expectancy. Okay, I have no idea what the 2030 challenge is, so I'd love to hear more about that. And then showing how Architecture Worldwide had already created a plan and was on their way to reaching their goal. I don't know what that's doing there, really. But it'd be great to have a new paragraph. When you go into, when asking Carrie the same question, she answered, in the last 20 to 30 years, the architecture industry has mostly addressed climate change by implementing and executing a standard program for designers. Oh, she's a fancy talker. Very formal. Construction contractors and building owners to follow. The program is LEED. Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. For a number of years, architects took on the responsibility to educate clients on LEED when working on a project with them. She then explained, in more recent years, due to the... I like the way you did that. We need a capital S there, but I like the way you split up the quote. In more recent years, due to the world's heightened awareness of climate change, most clients are familiar with the program and rely on the architects to incorporate aspects of the program into building projects. These aspects are many, including, yay, details, electricity, air quality, water usage, lighting, recycled materials, and consideration of where a project is located. Carrie was thorough in explaining programs that were in effect to make a difference. Rather than try to comment on how she explained it, what you want to comment on is what was said in that quote. In conclusion, I found the research I did to be thorough enough to understand things that have been done and will be done. Well, I mean, but what are the things that have been done and what will be done? I mean, we had the LEED thing, which we just got. We talked about the importance of teamwork, but I found the articles I needed to, the answers I needed, and the reassurance about things being taken into consideration. And obviously, you're not quite done, which I just realized here. So, but hopefully, me reading through it will give you some good ideas about where to go from here. My overall advice for sure is just that you've spent a lot of time talking about things that don't seem all that important to talk about. And if you haven't gotten enough interesting stuff to talk about, go ahead and look at another interview with an architect online, or look at an architect's website to see the kind of forms they use for project development, or getting a proposal or something like that. That would also be interesting stuff that would help you to have some stuff to really say, because I feel like you're very passionate, and the question is really good about the environment, but you haven't gotten a lot of specific answers that you're ready to talk about.